Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today we are going to be doing a leopard gecko care guide. If you are getting a leopard gecko or you already have one, this is a good video for you. Or if you're just thinking what a leopard gecko needs because you like them and you want one in the future, this is also a good video for you. We'll do more care guides like this with other reptiles. If you're watching the Gecko Deco, stick around. Okay, the first thing I want to talk to you guys about is substrate. Substrate is the soil, the sand, whatever you use as a flooring for your gecko. It could be paper towels, carpet, eco earth, coconut fiber, sand. We'll get into that. So, the worst substrate for your leopard gecko is sand. Sand can cause impaction. Impaction is when your leopard gecko ingests too much of its substrate and it gets stuck inside their stomach and they can't digest it, which can cause problems later and your leopard gecko could die. So sand is a big no-no in the reptile world, especially with leopard geckos. Try to avoid using it. Let's move on to the next one. Eco-earth is another common soil or substrate for your leopard gecko. Eco-earth is good, it's healthy for the leopard gecko. It's kind of like coconut fiber, and they can bury their eggs in it if you do have two breeding together. They can bury their eggs in it and they'll feel secure. Also, if they do ingest it, it will not cause impaction because it's easier for the leopard geckos to break down inside them. Another one is coconut fiber, which is kind of like eco-earth. It works the same way. So if you have eco-earth and then you see people talk about coconut fiber, you don't need to switch. They're basically the same thing and both work. Personally, I am using coconut fiber here as I like it the best. It looks pretty natural. Okay, another easy, very, very easy substrate is paper towel. Although it may look ugly, and that's my issue with it, it works very well because you can switch out paper towel very easily. It's not a loose substrate, so they can't ingest it, so impaction is kind of out of the books. With paper towel, it's a lot easier to monitor, especially if you have a quarantined or sick lizard that you're trying to help. It's easier to tell what's wrong with it based on like the color of the feces on the paper towel, or whether it's not eating, while other things like loose substrates like coconut fiber isn't. Another substrate is carpet. Reptile carpet is very, I don't want to say easy, but it's not as hard as some of the other ones. Personally, I don't like reptile carpet because you have to wash it maybe once a week, and their toes or skin could get caught in the little fibers of the reptile carpet. So you definitely don't want that. And for other reasons, it's good, like paper towel, like the reasons I said for paper towel, but for other reasons, like stuck toes in the reptile carpet and having to wash it normally, I wouldn't say it's the best substrate. Those of you who are using reptile carpet and like it and it's working for you, that's fine. That's great. If a substrate works for you, but I don't recommend it, that's perfectly fine. Just don't use sand. For those of you who are using a bioactive tank for your leopard gecko, awesome, I highly encourage that. The substrate there can't be better, it's perfect for them, it's a very natural environment. So I'm not going to talk about that one. Tile. Reptile tile. But I don't know if that's easier or harder in a way, because you can't really replace it and you kind of have to clean it with almost like, I mean, I guess you could replace it, but you do have to, if you didn't replace it, you'd have to clean it with a Clorox wipe or Lysol wipe, whatever. And that means you have to take out all the hides and the leopard gecko, and that just might be a little harder. While with eco-earth or coconut fiber, every 6 months, you can just switch it out, do a complete switch, and then that's good. Alright, enough with substrate. Now we're going to talk about diet. The diet of a leopard gecko is very, very important, whether it's having crickets, mealworms, waxworms, superworms, dubias, or other insects. As you guys might know, leopard geckos are insectivores, which means they eat mostly insects. So you won't be feeding them any fruits or plants that maybe a bearded dragon might eat. It's up to the personality of your leopard gecko to decide what it wants to eat. You may feed it mealworms one day, it likes it. Maybe one day you found superworms, you feed it superworms, then you go back to mealworms, it won't eat the mealworms, it only likes superworms now. So if that happens, just continue to feed them superworms, and maybe try another diet variation like crickets or dubias. Let's talk about mealworms. Protein level, the fat level can differentiate between these insects. So you want to look for that, whether your leopard gecko is either unhealthy, you're going to want a lot more protein levels, or if your leopard gecko is skinnier or smaller or younger, you want more fat levels in there. Calcium powder and vitamin powder are essential for your leopard geckos. You can dust them on your insects, which I recommend you do. You could have a little deli cup and pour the calcium or vitamin inside that. Do not mix them. If you're gonna pour calcium powder into it, just do the calcium. They know their calcium levels, they'll stop eating it. They won't continue eating it and over calcium themselves. Crickets are another great option for your leopard gecko diet. Crickets don't have as much fat as mealworms, but they do have a higher protein level. Crickets are another great source for your leopard geckos because it may be more interesting for them to chase their food rather than it sitting in a bowl like a mealworm or a superworm. It just might be more exhilarating for your leopard gecko. Now, if you do regularly feed them mealworms and then you introduce them to crickets, they may only eat the crickets. Personally, what I do is every night I'll feed them a certain amount of mealworms, and then whenever I can go to the pet store or I get crickets, I'll give them crickets as like a treat, maybe once a week. And sometimes the crickets can stay in there for a couple of days because they won't eat them all at once. But if the crickets are in there for over 4 or 5 days, I would take them out because that means your leopard gecko isn't going to eat them and it's not interested. And if they stay in your cage, it's just not good. Alright, let's talk about waxworms, superworms, and the other worms besides mealworms. They're not as healthy for you for the gecko as mealworms, but they're another good option. And if you don't have mealworms handy, you can use them. Alright, let's talk about dubias. Dubia roaches are illegal in Florida, so I cannot personally use them. I'm pretty sure they're illegal in Tennessee and Florida, something like that. So if you live in those states, you can't use them. But if you live in other states, then they might be a good option for your leopard gecko because they are pretty nutritious for them. They're very healthy for different reasons. Alright, let's talk about the hides for your leopard gecko. The hides are the exoteric caves, the little burrows, or whatever you have for your leopard gecko. It's for them to feel secure and go into. For one leopard gecko, you're going to want 3 hides. The warm hide should be between 87 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit. The cool hide for your leopard gecko is when it gets too hot and it just wants to go to a cooler place in the terrarium. The cool hide is going to be between 74 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And then the last hide is going to be your humid hide. That hide is going to help with shedding, could help with breeding, and then gives them benefits. To have a humid hide, you're going to want that hide to be fairly warm, so you may have a heat mat under it, but every day you're going to spray on top and the soil under with like a mister just to keep the humidity levels up. Also, for your hides, you're probably going to want a thermometer hygrometer to measure how hot, how cold, or how humid your hides are. Now let's talk about housing. Some people say for one leopard gecko you need a 20 gallon, some say more, some say less. I'd say a 20 gallon for one leopard gecko is ideal. While you can have 2 in one, it may not be as good for them, but if you don't have the money to have a bigger terrarium or 2 different ones, then that's okay too. Let's talk about cohabitation. To house 2 leopard geckos together is dangerous. You never want to house a male and a male together. That is a big no-no. They will tear each other apart for territorial reasons and mating reasons. A male and female will do okay. If you're breeding, then that's the only way to go, and that's fine. I recommend if you are breeding, this isn't a breeding video, so do other research, But if you are breeding, you're going to want to cycle the male into the female cage, so don't usually keep it with it year-round. The male can be aggressive towards the female, and it can hurt the female in different ways, so you just want to monitor that if you do have a male and female. Female and female usually works. It's probably the only case if you're not looking for breeding and you're only looking for housing. It's probably the only case where you can have two of them together, a female and female. So if you do have a female and female, that's fine. Although there are some cases where females will fight each other, and you're just going to want to monitor that so that it doesn't happen, because once it does happen, it might be too late. Okay, now let's talk about handling. When you're handling a leopard gecko, you might have it in one hand like I do. You're always going to want to have one hand in front so that when it does squirm, it'll go onto your other hand. You're going to want to be very gentle with them, because if you haven't handled your leopard geckos, they might not be as tame as mine. So you're definitely going to want to handle them with care and very gently. You're going to normally want to handle them gently anyway, but especially if you haven't handled them very much, you're going to want to be very careful. You could spook your leopard gecko, and that could cause them to drop their tail, which they can regrow it, but it takes a while and it'll never be the same. And when you spook them, they could lose trust, and they might not come out as much, and they might be even more squirmy when you're trying to hold them because they're spooked. The best way to pick a leopard gecko up is just kind of pick it up by its belly, like this, and then have a hand ready for it to crawl on. So yeah, that's all for handling. Okay, the last thing I'm going to talk about is if you are getting a leopard gecko, what do you want to look for? It is up to you whether you want a juvenile or an adult or even a hatchling. Personally, I don't recommend a hatchling because they're only a few days old and they could have survivability issues. If they're a juvenile, they're already healthy and you have a higher chance of keeping that gecko. Personally, I like to have juveniles because you get to see them grow up and you really get to bond with them. Also, I think they're cuter. If you want to just skip the growing up stage and you want an adult, that's fine too. Remember, leopard geckos typically they can live up to 20 years. So if you're not sure about a leopard gecko and you kind of just get one, that's not good. You don't want to impulse buy a leopard gecko because normally if you get one, you're going to have it for a very long time. If you're thinking about getting a leopard gecko, Petco, PetSmart, and other places like those big pet companies are not very good. You're going to want them from a small breeder for reasons like they don't treat their animals as well. For example, they may put 3 leopard geckos in a 10-gallon terrarium with one hide, or same thing with other geckos. They may have crested geckos and they have one hide and they put 4 of them in there, and that's just not good for the gecko. So smaller breeders are typically better if you're looking to buy a leopard gecko. If you are looking to get a leopard gecko, make sure you have all the supplies ahead of time, like the terrarium, the things inside the terrarium, the hides, the water. You want to have food handy. As I said in my last video, which click the card if you want to see it, when I said I bought the leopard geckos from Petco and I said I probably wouldn't do that again, I didn't mean I probably wouldn't buy leopard geckos again, but I probably wouldn't buy them from Petco again. Okay, that's it for this video. If I missed anything, please comment below if I did. If you have any other video ideas, also comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm Wyatt, and I'll see you in the next video.